So let's take a look at part three, because part three is when we start to see clues to his future career path. So notice again, the writer says that there are a variety of signposts, including AHA, CC, WW, right? And so they're very consistent through the whole section. Let's take a look at the specific annotations. One thing that you really should have noticed from the beginning was this realization or aha moment. And he says, I realized. So that's like a big clue that there's an aha moment. But what's cool about this person's annotation is that they didn't just answer the question. So they answered the question, right? Because that's proficient. They said this realization that it would take multiple things to reform could change things for the character by making him understand how hard it is to reform. Awesome. So, they could have just stopped there because that kind of answers the question, but they didn't. They continued going and answered both questions. For the story, it could unfold into a career path of helping others and making it easier for them to change themselves. So you always want to answer both questions or think about how it impacts the character, think about how it impacts the story, think about how it leads us to see a conflict if it's there, right? So you always want to push yourself a little bit. The next thing they noticed was a CC, when the contradiction is that his mentors are those people in jail, and that isn't something we would expect. And down here in the annotation, the reader clearly says the author included this to show how Senghor is reflecting on how in prison finding mentors is next to impossible. So again, we're not just answering the question, why is this a contradiction? We're saying why the writer included it. Great insight there. Okay, but you'll notice I highlighted something that the person didn't. So this person didn't highlight this one paragraph and didn't annotate it. So again, in every other area, right, if you're consistent, it's not totally a big deal if you miss one. However, in thinking about ultimate mastery, you should, in a short text like this, you should be catching all of these things. That doesn't mean this person didn't do a great job. I just wanted to point out that the expectation isn't that you're absolutely, absolutely perfect, but this writer is still very consistent. The reason I wanted to point this out, though, is that it's pretty key. And not only did he have mentors, but he found mentors in literature. So this is an aha moment because it shatters stereotypes that he had about himself. He now sees himself in a new light, and moving forward, since he sees himself in a new way, he starts to have more belief in himself as a person, that he can reform, that he can do better. So hopefully you saw that as an aha moment and you saw its importance. They also include words to the wiser. These words to the wiser were not obvious. So if you caught them, good for you. The first one is an amazing woman who ends up being the mother of his son, and she teaches him how to love himself in a healthy way. Now, she's not directly giving him advice, right? But we can infer that during their relationship, she taught him things about loving himself in a positive way. So, somewhere along the line, she imparted advice. So if you put words to the wiser for that, totally acceptable. I understand why you see it that way. At the bottom, though, it's more clear. She told me to forgive me, right? So, or he meets one of his victim's relatives, which is kind of a huge thing. And she essentially says to him, you need to forgive yourself because you've been abused in the past. You went through hardships that made you form these wrong decisions, right? So this reader totally recognizes that as words to the wiser. And the annotation is pretty cool. The reader says, the lesson he takes away from this is that even though people do bad things, they're deserving of forgiveness. Now, she could have stopped there, but she didn't. She pushed herself to mastery. The impact this would have had on Senghor is that it would open him up to repentance and moving on. He could move on with his life and forgive himself, his past self, knowing that he has now bettered himself. So she pushes herself to mastery by talking about how this words to the wiser will impact him, but also will change him, right? Character development or speaker development. So great job on that.